This meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. It's setting up your meeting for YouTube Live.
My screen says meeting is now streaming live.
It is now live.
We're alive on YouTube, folks. This is a class on the Heart Sutra. I'll be reading from some prepared notes that all the participants have. And I hope that all the participants have the text of the Heart Sutra in English and in Sino-Korean. Which is how we chant it during every practice. Let's see, right now, Ben Graham is filling the screen. And now I see other people filling the screen. I'm just going to go ahead and talk and never mind what's on the screen. Reading from the notes on the Heart Sutra.
And put yourself in grid view.
I'm sorry?
Put yourself in grid view and you'll see everyone.
How do I do this now?
Upper right.
Yeah, upper right.
You'll see grid view. Hit it.
That's speaker view. You want speaker view or what?
You want, if it says speaker view, you're in grid view. Do we look like all these little squares?
Do I look like this? It says
yours looks different from any. I'm going to come in and check. Hold on, guys.
Speaker view. Okay, speaker view.
Yeah, it's not in speaker view. It's in gallery view.
We want gallery view.
You want gallery view. Everyone else wants speaker view.
Does everybody have speaker view? Okay, I'm going to speak. Take it from the top. The Heart Sutra is a summary of the Prajna Sutras. These are much longer texts, varying from 8,000 to 100,000 lines that were written in Sanskrit, roughly between 100 BC and 300 AD. And you can find these translated by Edward Konza, to whom we'll refer a little bit later. A charming legend is that the Prajnaparamita teachings were guarded by the Nagas, mythical half-human, half-serpent beings who live underwater, and were given to the Naga king, named naturally Nagaraja, to the great monk and teacher Nagarjuna, who had one of the first major commentaries on the Prajnaparamita teachings, but not the Heart Sutra, since that had not yet been written. So this legend gives us an idea of the importance of these teachings to Mahayana Buddhism. So the Heart Sutra itself was composed between 300 and 500 AD. Its Chinese text is purportedly a translation from the Sanskrit, but that is a matter of some dispute. There's some evidence that it was originally written in Chinese and back translated into Sanskrit, and there's no definitive agreement on the question. I actually think the preponderance of the evidence is that the Chinese text was definitely translated from an original Sanskrit. In the Quantum School of Zen, we chant the Chinese text using the Korean pronunciation. And of course, we chant it in translation as well. So it's clear that the Heart Sutra was written in response to and as a refutation of some form of the Abhidharma and of other early Buddhist teachings. Abhidharma texts present themselves as the early teachings of the Buddha pertaining to what is, what we know, what we perceive, and how we know and perceive. In other words, a conflation of psychology and philosophy. And I will talk a little more about that when we come to the line in the Heart Sutras, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. Shariputra is, according to legend, the person to whom Buddha gave instruction in the Abhidharma, and how he gave that instruction is very interesting. During one monsoon season, Buddha ascended to the Tritrarincha heaven above Mount Sumeru to give instruction on Buddha's teaching to his mother, his birth mother, Maya, who died 7 days after childbirth. So he would teach his mother the complete Abhidharma. And then after he had done that, each day he would descend to Mount Sumeru and give a digest of that instruction to Shariputra, who wrote it all down. So Shariputra is the monk whom Buddha entrusted, who trusted most to compose and transmit his teaching in writing. So Shariputra is, of course, the person who's addressed in the Heart Sutra. It's addressed to the person whose interpretations of Buddha's teachings are here being refuted. Or to put it a little more mildly, Avalokiteshvara is offering some corrections to Shariputra's understanding of Buddha's teaching. The Heart Sutra is chanted widely within both the Mahayana and the Vajrayana schools. Vajrayana is Tibetan Buddhism, and is generally considered to capture the heart, hence its title, Heart Sutra, of Mahayana Buddhist teaching. And its wide adoption came after Xuanzang, who's one of the major figures in the 7th century dialogue between Indian and Chinese Buddhism. He made a 10,000-mile journey to India, studied at Nalanda University for 10 years, brought many, many texts back with him, and translated and did commentaries on these texts. So he's one of the major figures in Chinese Buddhism. So he attributed many miraculous escapes on his travels between China and India to chanting it, either the entire Heart Sutra or maybe simply the mantra at the end of the Heart Sutra. So he thought it saved him from all manners of demons and ghosts and bandits and marvels of nature that were threatening him. The impact that Xuanzang had on Chinese Buddhism is actually tremendous. And to anyone familiar with the Abhidharma, the Heart Sutra would have appeared revolutionary. And there's a story that when the Prajnaparamita teachings were first expounded, and this would have been in India, in the audience, the monks in the audience were so shocked that half of them immediately died of heart failure, which is why a recent commentary on the Heart Sutra, which you can see here, is titled the Heart Attack Sutra. And I hope no one here dies of a heart attack. But even if you come to it now with no previous knowledge of a Buddhist teaching, it is an extraordinary text. The translation that we use in the Quantum School of Zen is essentially the one originally done by Peter Schneider and Ryogen Yoshimura under the supervision of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. This would have been in the 1970s in San Francisco. The notes here say we changed one word from that version. We changed his mind has no hindrance to the mind has no hindrance. Actually, we have one other change, which is also a gender change and a pronoun. Otherwise, it's identical to what was really the first translation used for actual practice done into English. The San Francisco Zen Center no longer uses that Suzuki Roshi translation. They had another translation done in the 1990s, but that's where our translation comes from. It's not a perfect translation. I'll point out a couple of things as we go through the text. As we go through the text, I will occasionally refer to some of the key terms that are in the notes and the references to early Buddhist teachings. So I'm now going to go through the text in the English translation, of course. So the Maha means great. Prajna means wisdom. I want to talk about the word prajna here. Wisdom is beyond knowledge. That's actually what prajna means. The JNA is knowledge. Kind of actually cognate with the English word know, K-N-O. So prajna is beyond knowledge. So we can use wisdom as a word that perhaps transcends knowledge, but that's the idea. So wisdom is about the best we can do for a translation. A paramita is a perfection. Its etymology is param, which means beyond, and ita, which is gone, as in, say, itinerary, that IT. So a paramita is a perfection in the sense that it goes beyond ordinary norms. The prajna paramita is the last and highest of the 6 paramitas. I might be able to remember the 6 paramitas. Dana is giving, Shila is precepts, Kshanti is patience, Virya is energy, Jnana is meditation, and from all of that comes prajna, wisdom. So the prajna paramita, we talked about the prajna paramita sutras a little bit already, and the Heart Sutra is a digest of those very, very long sutras. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara means the Lord who looks down. That Ishvara, here Eshvara at the end means Lord. Ava means down. And Lok can be actually translated as look or place, or both at the same time. So the Lord who looks down on the world with compassion. The whole direction of the Heart Sutra is aimed not simply at deeper understanding, but understanding that can activate compassion for all beings. Chinese is Quan Shi Yin, and that's where we get Quan Se which we translate as perceive world sound. Quan Se Bodhisattva. So that's the Bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara is considered to be the greatest of the Bodhisattvas. Others are Jijang Bosal, chanted Jijang Bosal, and Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and a few more. But Avalokiteshvara is regarded as the greatest. Avalokiteshvara is masculine in its grammatical gender, but a variant would be Tashvara, which would mean specifically looking down on or perceiving the sound of the world's lamentation. That would be feminine gender. So we can regard Avalokiteshvara as either masculine or feminine or non-gendered, if you want. I prefer to regard her as feminine. When practicing deeply, the prajna paramita presumably had already perfected the previous 5 paramitas, perceives that all 5 skandhas are empty. The Chinese, for some reason, leaves out a phrase that is in all of the Sanskrit manuscripts here. Not simply empty, but empty of svabhava, of self-being. Empty of self-being. So that's understood, perhaps, but I think it really should be expressed. And it's not that the English is translating the Chinese accurately, but the classic Chinese texts leave out something that is in all of the Sanskrit texts, and I don't think anyone knows why. So we'll talk about that as we go along. Empty of self-being. That means empty of independent being. Also empty of any personal being. What that means, I hope, will become clearer as we go through. The skandhas are 5 in number, and skandhas are the principal classification used in the Abhidharma. Form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, and we'll go through those farther down. You see there's a short paragraph. No form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. They're regarded as the, skandha actually means a tree trunk, probably something like a banana tree trunk, which is segmented in some way. It's not clear why that word was chosen for this category, or these categories of phenomena. But they constitute our complete understanding of the world as we ordinarily understand it. So, empty, again, of self-nature, and is saved from all suffering and distress. So apparently Avalokiteshvara had some kind of enlightenment experience that's being described here. But I should say that the Chinese is ambiguous. This could mean perceives that all 5 skandhas are empty and is able to save all beings from suffering and distress. So that's simply one of the vagaries of the text and of translating the text. It seems that since bodhisattvas save beings, that's probably a better interpretation. And I suppose you have to be saved yourself before you can save anyone else. So then Shariputra is addressed. Form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness, form. Form is the first of the 5 skandhas. Form is not the material world, but our perception of the material world. So I think that's a distinction, worth making. So the world of form is the world as we perceive it through our senses. That's the first skandha, rupa, form. And then the same is true of feelings, which are not so much emotional feelings, but sensations of various sorts. Perceptions through all of the senses. Impulses, which is a word in Sanskrit that's difficult to render. Actually, if you, I think it has 7 or 8 meanings when you look it up in a dictionary. Some scholars, including Red Pine, whose commentary on the Heart Sutra is actually superb, and the one that I would recommend if you really want to study the Heart Sutra, translates it as memory. The memory that's deeply embodied in us, and that forms our action on the basis of all of our experiences, which somehow are coded into our system, memory in that sense, not simply recall. And finally, consciousness. These are the 5 skandhas. Everything else in the Abhidharma is organized around the 5 skandhas. And these everything else's are called dharmas. So I think you had this question, Tim, this morning about dharma. So Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. In the Abhidharma, dharmas do appear and disappear. Some are tainted, some are pure. A word not used here, but some are conditioned and some are unconditioned, and they increase and decrease. She says, no, nothing of the kind. The word dharma, the Sanskrit word, is from a root dharm, which means it's actually cognate with, that is related linguistically, etymologically, to firm, holding fast, real, something like that is its basic meaning. So as I said, these are the ultimate constituents of the world, the dharmas. In the Abhidharma, the dharmas are numbered, I think 75 dharmas. It might be 73, I might be misremembering. 70 of them are conditioned, 3 of them are unconditioned. Space and 2 kinds of nirvana. And I don't know what the 2 kinds are, I don't remember. So many, many dharmas, and they have names that we would identify with psychological terms. Mental states, feelings, emotions, that sort of thing. We construct the world out of these dharmas. Mind makes everything. And this is how, in the Abhidharma, mind makes everything, using these fundamental elements called dharmas. Psychological elements might be the best way to describe it. Some people have said it's like the psychological periodic table, like a periodic table of elements, but instead of material elements, we have psychological states and phenomena. So by saying all dharmas are marked with emptiness, Avalokiteshvara is, I think I have a visitor. Thank you. My chat is open, by the way, if you want to send messages.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
You already have 2 messages.
Yeah, and I read both of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'm not going to respond to them yet, if that's okay. So this is very comprehensive. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. These are the 5 skandhas. So first, the assertion that form does not differ from emptiness, and the same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Then the reason why this is true is because all dharmas are marked with emptiness, and then repeating, therefore in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. This is starting to sound very nihilistic, like there's nothing at all. But just as form does not differ from emptiness, emptiness does not differ from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This will become clear as we go along, but I didn't want anyone to have a heart attack right now. So then we have 3 paragraphs going through, again, Abhidharma classifications. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth, and going through ears, nose, tongue, and body, and mind, until no realm of mind consciousness. So there's a little abbreviation in the middle there. So these are the organs of perception, and the perceptions, the field of perception, all of them are negated here. What does it mean for them to be negated. Emptiness is not nothingness. There's a reciprocity between emptiness and all of these classificatory items here. The next paragraph has to do with and here we can look at the notes. In fact, let's look at the notes here, partly as review and partly to take us where we are now. The references to early Buddhist teachings. Form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness refers to the 5 skandhas. So we've covered that. Do not appear or disappear refers to the fundamental early Buddhist teaching of impermanence. One of Buddha's earliest teachings is the 3 marks of existence, the Tri Lakshana. And that word Lakshana will, meaning mark, will come up again. Impermanence is the first of the 3 marks of existence. The second is suffering. So impermanence, suffering, and the third is anatman, which means no self. So, same as no self-being in the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra actually begins, or very early in the Heart Sutra, we have an affirmation of the third of these marks. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. Of self-being. Again, that's omitted from our text, but it's certainly there in the Sanskrit text. But here, the 3 marks of existence are among the Buddhist teachings that are negated. Negated is kind of an unfortunate word. Negated seems to mean, well, it does mean like completely wiped out, not there at all. That's only half, of the story. The other half is they are exactly the same as emptiness. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So we'll get to that part. Again, continuing with the notes, tainted or pure, again, refers to the fundamental early Buddhist teaching of purity versus impurity. Here, the purity and impurity refer to the dharmas. So some dharmas are said to be tainted or impure. That's part of the classificatory scheme. So it's the whole scheme that's being negated by reference to salient details. And the no eyes, no ears, no tongue, no body, no mind. These are the 6 organs of perception, which are the first step of consciousness. You have to perceive things in order to be conscious of them. They have to come in through the sense organs. Then where we are now, no ignorance and also no extinction of it, refers to the 12 links in the chain of codependent origination. This actually goes back to Buddha's experience the night he was enlightened. How does suffering originate? The 12 links of dependent origination is what this is called. And taking the 12 links of dependent origination in reverse order is the way out of suffering. So this is a very particular teaching, the 12 links in the chain of codependent origination. I've never been able to memorize the 12 links in the chain of codependent origination. I don't know if anyone else may have. Judy, maybe you have. She shakes her head no. Scholars think that originally it wasn't 12, that there were, here's a list of 4, here's a list of 3, here's a list of 6, and they were all somehow put together into a list of 12. And to tell you the truth, it's never made cogent sense to me. In any case, it's completely negated here, so we don't have to worry about it. So that's the no ignorance and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them. The idea is that suffering comes from old age and death. Where does old age and death come from? Where does the one before that come from? And you work your way all the way back to number one. The origin of it all is ignorance. That is not ignorance of facts, but a mind that is clouded, that doesn't see clearly. And then you can see what's being negated in the next three lines. No suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, and also no attainment with nothing to attain. These are the Four Noble Truths, which are more foundational in Buddhism, than anything else. So the path referred to here is the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the way out of suffering. And the Eightfold Noble Path ends with not exactly cognition, but wisdom, prajna. I think cognition's an unfortunate choice of words here. And no attainment with nothing to attain. The bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita, and the mind is no hindrance. This is worth looking at. It might be better to, it certainly would be better to translate the mind has no hindrance. It's not that the mind in and of itself is a hindrance. A clear mind is no hindrance. The Sanskrit says the mind has no walls. It's avarana, no walls. Nothing that closes it off from the world, that blinds it from the world as it is. So either has no hindrance or maybe a more drastic revision, I think, is appropriate here. And without any hindrance, no fears exist. And the fears, the way I understand this, if the mind does not have any walls built around it, then you don't have a feeling of claustrophobia. You don't feel walled in, cut off from the world, hopeless. That's the sort of suffering that I think is referred to here. Suffering that come from fears, claustrophobic fears, not being connected with the universe. And far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. So originally in the San Francisco translation, it was he dwells in nirvana, so we changed it to one. Perverted in the Sanskrit actually has upside down, like inverted. I don't think it makes that much difference. Inverted, perverted. Perverted is twisted. Inverted is topsy-turvy. I think that comes to the same thing. Nirvana. Nirvana literally means no wind. So the winds, that are like typhoon winds, hurricane winds, whirling our mind around, causing confusion and suffering. Everything becomes calm and clear in nirvana. In the three worlds, that refers to past, present, and future, not to three separate universes, simply all time. All Buddhas depend on prajna paramita and attain anuttara samyak sambodhi. For some reason, we don't translate the Sanskrit here. I asked Zen Master Sung-san about this. He says, oh, those Chinese characters just for sound. What he was saying was that the Sanskrit was not translated into Chinese, but its sound was represented. So for some reason, the Chinese translators did not choose to translate into Chinese Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Instead, simply used Chinese characters, which would be pronounced something like Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. That was his explanation. I'm not so sure about it. Anuttara, unexcelled. Samyak, perfect. Sambodhi, literally perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know that, and here we have a really difficult to understand, to explain shift. All of this has been quite rational. It's a critique of a rational system in terms that we can understand. Now we're shifting to the world of magic. Prajnaparamita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So a mantra is a spell. The Chinese translation here is Ju, meaning a spell, a magic spell. We're in the realm of magic now. It's quite an abrupt shift. Prajnaparamita has been explained in some detail in, you might even say, philosophical terms that we can understand. And Prajnaparamita enables Buddhas depend on it, and they attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi from Prajnaparamita. And now Prajnaparamita becomes a mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering. So the Eightfold Noble Path was taught by Buddha as the way out of suffering. Here we have the recitation of a mantra as the way to relieve all suffering. And how can a mantra be true or false? It seems that those categories would not apply to a mantra. It just is what it is. But we're encouraged to recite or proclaim a Prajnaparamita mantra. And it goes, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi, Svaha. Gate means gone. It's Sanskrit. And the grammatical form could be a feminine noun in the vocative case, that is, you're invoking Prajnaparamita, who is certainly can be female. So it's Prajnaparamita, which is gone, gone. Or it could be what grammarians call a locative absolute. That is not grammatically connected to anything else in the sentence, which is, I think, the way we understand it when we recite it in English, gone. We don't think of this as a participle modifying Prajnaparamita. Gone, gone, and paragate, gone beyond. We see Sam quite a bit. And again, it means perfect, complete. So perfectly or completely gone beyond. Bodhi, awake. So a bodhisattva is an awakened being whose whole life is to awaken other beings in the interest of relieving suffering. And then svaha is rejoice. It's a very old Sanskrit word. It was used at the end of a lot of Vedic texts. You read through this long philosophical text, and at the end you say svaha, like, yay, we got through this. So we have really what amounts to very sophisticated and pretty understandable philosophy and magic. The one word that the Heart Sutra turns on is the word empty. This is in Sanskrit, shunya. That's the adjective. And shunyata, emptiness, that would be the noun form. So shunya means hollow, void in the sense of something that looks like it's whole, but is hollow inside, like a bubble. Chinese translated it using the same word that they use for sky, gong. And I wonder if that has to do with when you look at the blue sky, that it looks like there's really a blue dome there. I don't think the Chinese knew there was no blue dome there, that it's empty. But it looks like it's some sort of film anyway, containing all of this air. So it's essentially empty. That may or may not be true. It's maybe just my fancy. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. When we say things like all dharmas are marked, with emptiness, it does not mean that they don't exist. It doesn't mean that any of these things, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, and all of the psychological functions of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. Shunyata is not nothingness. It's rather a way of expressing the lack of anything separating anything else. That there's no barriers, no walls, no hindrances. Everything is so deeply interconnected that you can say that everything is everything else. Complete interpenetration. Certainly we understand that everything depends on everything else. And our scientific understanding of the universe has gotten us that far. But it's another step to say that everything is everything else. There's only one thing. That seems to be a violation of the law of non-contradiction. Aristotle said, if you take away the law of non-contradiction, everything is one. He thought that was absurd. Maybe it's not so absurd that everything is one. I think that's where the Heart Sutra, at any rate, is leading us. My voice is dwindling. It really doesn't differ very much from emptiness at all right now. So I'm going to pause and see if we can go through the 8 questions that have come through on the chat. First question, given that Chinese and Korean is not the primary language of many American Buddhists, why not chant the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit? I think that's a good democratic solution, chanting it in Sanskrit. But we are American Buddhists, but we have deep Korean roots, and we honor our tradition. So it's staying within the tradition that gave birth to us is the main reason we chant in Korean, and American Buddhists who have Japanese roots will chant in Japanese and likewise in Chinese. But it is an appealing idea. Why not chant the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit? Well, we do chant it in English, of course, and I think that's American enough for anybody. And then I thought that impulse was meant the impulse to act before you actually act. In other words, it is something that arises in the mind. I just read a long discussion of this, actually. Where do these impulses come from is the point. They're built in some way, and they're part of our deep memory you might say, and that's the argument. I don't like translating it as memory. I don't think there's any good translation. But yeah, the impulse to act before you actually act. And what was revolutionary about the sutra in its historical context? Well, historically, Buddhism developed over a period of several centuries. Buddha lived in the in the 400s, not sure of exact dates, BC. And the Buddhism that developed, you might say directly from Buddha, is known as Theravadan Buddhism, which means the way of the elders. It would have been the Theravadan monks who would have had a heart attack when they first heard the Heart Sutra preached. They knew very well about Mahayana Buddhism, but simply kept separate from it. So Mahayana Buddhism is more a Southeast Asian locale anyway, where Buddhism developed after it left India. And the Heart Sutra is, the strongest expression of Mahayana Buddhism. Maybe there's more to be said about that, but that's the gist of it. Buddhism had already been practiced for, I would say, a good 6 centuries before the Heart Sutra was written, and it was really considered to be revolutionary. After all, it negates all traditional Buddhist teaching. And then, could I say more about eyes, color, realm of eyes, realm, excuse me. Yes, realm is confusing. So you might say that color, or light anyway, because I suppose you could be colorblind, but black and white is the realm of eyes. I myself don't see. I think realm is kind of an expansion of the notion that color is the object of the eye's perception. But this applies not only to eyes, it applies to eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body of mind. So there's no realm of mind consciousness. And I just think it's, the only way that I understand it is that it's an expansion. It gives a world in which color and the various other phenomena that the other senses relate to exist in, rather than simply the thing itself. And let's see, I'm not sure if I have any other messages. No, here's one. You said that Mahayana Buddhism developed. It did not originate in Southeast Asia, but I think a large part of its development was in Southeast Asia. It's actually northeastern India where it originated. So I should have said went on and developed significantly in China, in Southeast Asia. Judy mentioned earlier today, Ray, chanting the Heart Sutra. How do you recommend using it as a chant or daily practice if one knows it by heart in both languages? In other words, should you choose one or the other? I would recommend chanting it in Chinese, if you know it in Chinese, or the Sino-Korean or the Sino-Japanese version, but making sure you know what every word means. And so that's why I, produced the, I don't know if this will appear, the interlinear translation. So here's the Heart Sutra in Sino-Korean, and beneath each word of Sino-Korean is a literal translation That doesn't make for a very fluent experience, but it will give you a good idea of what each Chinese word means. And I think that's the best way to chant it. But I think if you had to choose one, I would chant it in translation in English, so that it means something. And you always have the Sanskrit mantra at the end, which certainly should be left in Sanskrit. Part of the idea of a mantra, that it's a magical spell, is that the very vibrations, the sonic vibrations of gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, swaha, are efficacious directly, quite apart from any meaning. Most mantras don't have meanings. That is, you can't translate them. They are simply pure sound. Maybe they're Sanskrit syllables, but they're not Sanskrit words. So this is a very unusual mantra in that you can actually translate it. It actually has a meaning. And then China is Northeast Asia. I thought I said that, but maybe I didn't make that clear. Yes, China is Northeast Asia. I think I said Northeast Asia, China. But anyway, thank you for all your corrections. And I think that's all of the messages. I'm sorry if those labeled privately, maybe I shouldn't have, I don't know what privately means in these chat messages. Maybe I shouldn't have answered them publicly. So anyway, my apologies for that and for all my other deficiencies in presenting the Heart Sutra. Most important is to practice the Heart Sutra. Most of you probably pretty much know.
I have a question.
Yes.
Carol, I have a question.
A question? Who?
Carol Ann has her hand up.
Why don't I see that? I don't know.
Working very well, and it just
Anyway, you raised your hand, so please speak.
I already spoke. You already answered my question. This has been wonderful. This is the second time I've heard this course, and it's better the second. I'm getting more out of it this time. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go for broke and have it a third time sometime.
No, I'll go for that.
Okay, anyway, thank you all very much. Is there anything else?
Well, I want to ask people if you would all unmute yourself for a minute. I'll go back.
Everybody unmute yourselves.
And what I'm wondering is if people would be interested in going to small breakout discussions right now. Raise your hand if you'd be interested, and if enough people are interested, I'll do that. So could you raise your hand if you're interested? Got 2, 3.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, 7. Okay, I'll make 2 breakout rooms, and if people want to do that, that would be fine.
Should you be in one and I should be in the other, or just not?
You will automatically go into one if you stay on.
Okay.
So if people want to leave, why don't you leave and then I'll really have a sense. So leave like by the time, leave in the next 30 seconds. That doesn't mean leave the room, it means turn off. And then I'll see how many, so leave the meeting, and then I'll see how many breakout rooms we need.
It's good to see all of you. And Liz, it's good to see you for the first time. Okay, so 2 breakout rooms.
Okay, so 1, 2, we have 1, 2, so we have 14. Okay, 1, 2, 12, 13 people. Okay, 3 breakout rooms seems to be right. So I'll make 3 breakout rooms. Stan, you'll automatically be in one. I'll go in the other one. Well, you and I go in, you'll go in one, I'll go in the other one, and then you will see what happens. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Stan, it was terrific.
Thank you.